Remember when we all thought Netflix would actually be a legitimate competitor to Hollywood? Weren't those the days? Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Alexander Skarsgård discovers that actions speak louder than words in Netflix's Mutes. This movie is set several years into the future in Berlin, where a mute bartender Leo, played by Alexander Skarsgård, lives with his girlfriend, played by Sinead Saleh. But when his girlfriend disappears without a trace, he ventures out into the city in order to find her, and in his quest he repeatedly encounters a pair of mysterious surgeons played by Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux, who might hold the key to his girlfriend's whereabouts, but can they be trusted? Mutes is the latest film from Duncan Jones, who previously gave us Moon and Source Code, and this movie is one he's been wanting to work on for several years. It's been a real passion project for him, and I've been pretty excited to see it ever since I first saw the concept art for it online. It looked very visually interesting and I was really looking forward to seeing it, especially with the recent revival of cyberpunk with stuff like Blade Runner 2049 and Altered Carbon. And with Netflix really making a major dent in the marketplace, I was definitely looking forward to this one. I was definitely rooting for Netflix to really succeed with this one, and Netflix has really made some truly fantastic shows in recent years, but their output with films has been very hit or miss. And sadly, Mute tends to veer more towards the latter a lot of the time. That's not to say that the film is all bad, it does have a couple of good things going for it. For one, Jones's direction is fairly solid throughout. He demonstrates a very meticulous eye to how the film looks, as well as to the little details throughout the film, especially in its first 30 minutes. You spend a lot of time with Leo and you get a good sense of his daily life, almost entirely without dialogue. It's in these moments where I think Jones really demonstrates his skills and capabilities as a director, and I do really appreciate Jones's commitment to the material. It's not lazily directed and there is a strong vision behind it. And on a technical level, the film does look very good. The visuals are pretty stunning and there's some great use of colours. You can tell that Jones is really trying to replicate the style and look of something like Blade Runner, and I think he does a good job of doing that. But it does feel a little bit too reminiscent of Blade Runner, and the setting itself doesn't really have much of an identity outside of just copying Blade Runner a lot of the time. While I am impressed with a lot of the film's visuals, there's a lot of shots and compositions in there that do look very bland and uninspired. It's a very inconsistent movie in terms of its overall look. And the film does start out quite intriguing, it does have a good hook to it. And I like the whole idea of a mutant man investigating somebody's disappearance. That particular aspect of the story did hook me for a while, especially because there's a lot of scenes where he's forced to communicate with others through writing, and there's no inner monologue like in your typical detective story. But even then, that particular aspect is really underutilized a lot of the time. We never really get a good understanding of what Leo is thinking or how he's putting all the pieces together. I get that this concept is a pretty challenging one to convey on screen, but I don't think they've really executed this idea very well beyond the first 30 minutes. Another thing that does kind of work in the movie's favour is that the movie does take its time sort of setting up the relationship between Leo and his girlfriends, so whenever she goes missing there is some degree of investment in his plight. And there are a couple of scenes throughout the movie where you do genuinely feel for him, like how he has to rely on strangers to help him when he's trying to order food because he can't speak, because everything's so verbal in the future. It's moments like that that are genuinely quite heartbreaking. And it also helps that Skarsgård does a fairly solid job in the lead role. He does manage to sell this image of a brute with puppy dog eyes quite well. He looks like he can kick your ass if you push his buttons too much, but can also show a more sensitive side when he needs to. I can see Skarsgård working well in similar roles like this. But if I'm being honest, despite his best efforts, I just didn't find the character all that interesting or compelling. He just kind of remains a blank slate for much of the movie. The character is a real far cry to somebody like Sally Hawkins in The Shape of Water, Ryan Gosling in Drive. On the other hand, Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux both do a very solid job as the two surgeons. Rudd as Cactus Bill appears to be the straight man of the duo, playing this former soldier that's fallen on hard times after going MIA. You can tell that he doesn't really like being around his partner, and the only reason he sticks around is because he's trying to find a way to leave Berlin with his daughter, all while this job and the company he's surrounded with eat away at his sanity. Whereas Theroux is just flat out insane from the start. He's absolutely crazy. He's a very depraved, very nutty character, and almost serves as a reflection of what Cactus Bill could end up being. There's a sort of uneasy friendship between them, and it helps that Theroux and Rudd do have good chemistry together. Theroux really makes the role of Duck his own, which isn't much of a surprise because he's played some pretty solid villains in the past, and Rudd is quite admirable in a role that's against type from the usual usual comedic doofus roles that I've seen him in. I'd probably watch an entire movie about just these two characters. In fact, most of the time it almost feels like they are in their own movie, because they interact with the main story so little that their entire arc and narrative just feels completely disjointed from Leo's overall arc. And the movie really tries very hard to connect these two storylines, but it's just so clumsily done, especially in the film's third act. And up until that point, it feels very aimless and meandering with its structure. It really feels like two different movies awkwardly spliced together. On one hand, you'll have Leo running around trying to find his girlfriend, and on the other hand, you'll have these two guys just goofing around, not really doing anything. What's even more frustrating about the film is that the script is just littered with interesting ideas that are underdeveloped. There's this whole idea that Leo had an Amish upbringing and that's how he ended up mute because of an accident. I think that's something that they could have really developed, but that aspect is just kind of discarded about 10 minutes in, and it's seldom brought up again after that. There's also a couple of scenes between Leo and Cactus Bill's daughter Josie, which does suggest sort of like a father-daughter relationship, but then that doesn't really go anywhere. And some of the relationships in this film just feel awkward. The relationship between Leo and his girlfriend, even the relationship between Cactus Bill and Duck feels a bit weird. The main signifier of this is a scene towards the end where Cactus Bill finds out something about Duck after some of Duck's escapades come to light. There's a very tense scene between the two of them where Cactus Bill threatens to do something to him, and then immediately afterwards they're off bowling and partying. It's so off-kilter, especially in regards to the character of Duck himself. He does some really reprehensible things in the film, and the way this movie handles that particular aspect is a bit questionable and honestly a bit distasteful as well. I can't exactly say what he does because I do think it is going into spoiler territory, but I'll put it to you like this, it's probably one of the main reasons why this movie has had a hard time getting made. And believe me, it doesn't give me any pleasure to say any of this. And I do really appreciate and commend Jones for trying to get his vision on screen. You can tell that this movie is very personal to him, but that also kind of makes it doubly heartbreaking too. Because for all that passion and for all that effort, it just doesn't reflect in the quality of the film. And it's yet another indication that Netflix isn't quite the saviour of cinema that we all thought they would be. It's not quite as bad as something like The Cloverfield Paradox, but it's still very disappointing regardless. I mean, it's a very bizarre and off-kilter film. It tries really hard to emulate Blade Runner, and while it does benefit from Jones's directing and its lead performances, the script, story and villains are all very uneven, especially since the film fails to live up to its initially promising first act. And it really squanders a lot of potentially interesting ideas as it attempts to navigate these two very loose, interconnecting stories, and that's before we get to the movie's extremely questionable handling of potentially upsetting subject matter. So on a scale of 0 to 10 with 0 meaning absolute irredeemable shit, and 10 meaning an outstanding flawless masterpiece, I'm gonna give Mute a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's quite as bad as the critics have made it out to be, and I do think there is some merit to the film, but it is overall a bit of a disappointment, and if you are looking for some good cyberpunk, I'd say you'd just be better off watching Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 again. So Mute, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, or both. Or maybe even subscribe to my channel while you're at it. And if there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, I'm always happy to hear feedback. I can also be found on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I can also be contacted via email. Links are down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.